The following are the tools and materials needed in assembling a 50 watts plus 50 watts stereo amplifier. Now open the chassis. You'll be able to see the plastic container of wires, output terminals, switch, fuse, and the 50-50 watts stereo amplifier kit. Now set aside the chassis and other materials. Open the amplifier kit plastic container. Here is the diagram. Diagram for 50-50 watts amplifier. Now, take the PCB or the printed circuit board. Put the components on one side, then get all the Phillips resistors and diodes from the components. This time, identify the value of each resistor. After identifying the value of resistors, mount it on the PCB. Since Phillips type resistor do not have polarity, there is no need to worry about where to place the terminals. Just make sure that you are placing the resistor on its corresponding value on the PCB. This is the last Phillips resistor. Congratulations! You are done mounting the resistors. Now plug the soldering iron and start soldering the connections. Make sure that the soldering iron is hot and ready by applying solder on the tip. Then wipe it on the wet rag. Maintain the effectiveness of the soldering iron in making connections by habitually wiping and cleaning the soldering iron tip before making the connections. Place the soldering iron first on the terminals. This is to heat the pad and the terminal so that the solder will freely flow on the pad and terminal of component. Apply enough solder, then after a second or two, remove the soldering iron in an upward direction. Let the solder dry naturally. Continue soldering the connections. Solder all the terminals that can be freely soldered by the iron, especially those located at the side of the PCB. you are able to solder enough number of terminals, pause soldering. Place the soldering iron on its stand. Then, cut the excess terminals of soldered components. After cutting the terminals, all the terminals of soldered components, continue soldering the remaining terminals. Then, right after that, cut again all the excess terminals and inspect your connections. Since you are going to mount diodes, unplug the soldering iron. This will prevent the tip of the iron to develop carbon and avoid overheating of soldering iron. Be mindful of the polarity of the diodes. The band on the component is also indicated on the PCB using a thick line. After mounting the diodes, solder the connections and cut the excess terminals. Since you are done with resistors and diodes, continue by mounting the capacitors. Again, start with the smallest capacitor going to the tallest components that need to be mounted on the PCB.
Okay, be mindful of the polarity. Okay, so the longer terminal, this is electrolytic, polarized. So the longer terminal is positive, and there it is. No? There is a plus sign, means that is the positive terminal. Okay, dismount it. Okay.
After mounting small components, start mounting taller and bigger components. Start with the cement type resistors. So since it has no polarity, so you can mount it in any direction. Just make sure that you place it on its proper location.
terminal positive, short terminal negative. Okay? So this is 470 microfarad. There it is. So positive. Look at the positive sign. There it is. Positive sign. Positive. With white shade, negative. Okay?
Start mounting the Mylar capacitors. Since these capacitors have no polarity, you can mount it on the PCB just by following the correct code.
Since they are all mounted, all the Mylar capacitors mounted on the uh, PCB, so we can start soldering it.
On mounting the transistors, you need to read the code of the transistors, and then mount the terminals. Bend the terminal so it can be fitted on the PCB. And lastly, follow the printed position of the transistor on the PCB. The last component that you will need to solder on the PCB is the IC, or the integrated circuits. You need to make sure that all its terminals are mounted on the PCB. Do the necessary adjustment on the terminals to have it mounted. After mounting the IC, do not solder it. Attach the heatsink to the IC first, so it can be fitted on the board as well as to the IC. Then, tighten the screw. After that, you may now solder all the terminals of the integrated circuits, or the IC. When you are able to solder all the terminals of the IC, You may proceed now in attaching the different terminals on the chassis. Congratulations!